Welcome, everyone. I'm just so pleased you're here. Some of you have been attending these webinars since I began in April 2020, and that is just wonderful. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a part of the community. For others of you, this is your first time. Welcome to you as well. We do this every month, and you are more than welcome. You are valued. I also want you to know that I love that you chat with one another, provide thoughts, suggestions, and I do read all the comments at the end of the webinar. So thank you for that participation. I've given you a brief update on New York each time, New York City, and the news continues to be good. We're packed, we're crowded. I laugh because it's pretty challenging walking around because of all the electric bicycles. If you come to town, be forewarned. Look both ways before you step off the curb. Those bicyclists are just, if I can be so bold, they're nuts. I've also shown you a photo each time of a garden or something in a garden, and I'm going to do the same thing right now. As many of you know, I walk most days in the little Tudor City greens, not far from where I live. And I think, a wonderful photo. You've heard the expression, birds of a feather flock together. Well, here in New York, we seem to lean more to diversity. So there's this great photo I took just the other day. A cardinal, a little brown bird, a pigeon, and keeping in mind I know nothing about birds, what looks to me like a duck. Diversity. Isn't that cardinal fabulous? Very flashy. I also am delighted to announce that we have 3 more webinars scheduled. In July, the art of revealing backstory. We have some wonderful quotes and approaches to share from Lee Child and David Baldacci. Many best-selling authors who just are so generous with their information. In August, we can take a look at creativity and how so many writers are fearful that artificial intelligence is going to put them out of business, and I'm convinced it's just the opposite. We'll explain that. And then in September, we're going to pick up on the forks in the road character transformation that I did last month and talk about how to create characters that resonate with emotional truth. We'll be delving into the anatomy of truth. John releases a YouTube little shorty, a short 1 to 3 minute answer to a frequently asked question every Wednesday. If you like them, please do share, like it, subscribe to the channel. That'd be great. And we're getting ready to give first dibs to the insiders list for 2 new mystery mastermind workshops. Those are virtual, 5 people, 6 sessions every 2 weeks. Sometimes we skip a week if there's a holiday in there. And that's going to happen over July 4th weekend. So please do get on the insiders list if you want first dibs. They typically sell out within hours or days. And then I do want to mention, we're already in the next cycle. I think it'll be the 18th now. And I have to update this because this is the Readsy. I know we were named one of the best contests. I'm just so excited. May 31st is always the deadline. The winner gets published in Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, then $1,000, no entry fee. So it's a good deal, and I'm excited about it. And we're now just going to our readers, and it's wonderful. It's great. So that's New York and our plans moving forward. You know that I'm an author of both fiction and nonfiction, and I'm a teacher. I teach at Lehman College, part of the City University of New York, and I do tons of workshops like this and in person. I speak at conferences. I hope I'll see some of you at the Writer's Digest conference in August, where I'm a guest author and doing a couple of presentations. And That said, it is now my great honor to introduce my very special guest, Adam Chromy. Adam is a literary agent, but he is more than that. He is a published author in his own right, a screenwriter, film, TV producer, and he operates a boutique New York City literary agency called Movable Type Management, and he's done it for more than 30 years. His value-based storytelling, which we'll hear a little more about, I hope, it's made him a top player in New York City and Los Angeles, and a frequent speaker at writing conferences. I looked him up on the Publishers Marketplace listing, and he goes into some more depth about his view of storytelling. And that's where I'd like to start. First, welcome, Adam.
Hello, Jane. It's so nice to see you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. So, Adam, you say we're not in the book business, we're in the story business. Can you explain?
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to. I went to business school, which separates me from most literary agents out there. Most of them have MFAs or have studied literature in college. And I took a more practical route as the son of immigrants. I didn't think a career in the arts was available to me. So, but I spent all of my free time with artists and writers and creative people. So by the time I was in my late 20s, I realized that I wanted to, live an authentic life and pursue my dreams, even if it meant less money and was a more challenging route. So I took an internship at a literary agency at the age of 29 to get my foot in the door and begin this 20-year career, not 30. I don't know. Your bio said 30 years. I've only been doing this for 20 years.
Well, I misspoke. I thought it said 20 years. So if I said 30, I misspoke. That's all.
Yeah. So it's been 20 years. But what I realized when I started working at the literary agency was that a lot of the experience I had gotten from the business world actually directly applied to publishing. And there were other agents to competition that I was working against that may have had more experience with books and maybe even more training on the editorial side from their writing degrees. I knew that I had an advantage of them in the business realm. So I marketed myself that way as an agent who could help authors with the narrative of their career, because a career is a narrative. I would be their business brain because a lot of them are creative types and are not that great at business. And I saw that the lessons I learned at business school directly applied to what I was doing as an agent. And namely, this metaphor between story and books comes from an axiom in business that the railroads, which were the most powerful businesses at the turn of the 20th century, they owned all the land because the railroad tracks were on the land. You couldn't do any commerce without rail travel. And they had all the billionaires of the time were railroad magnates. And it seemed like they would have a monopoly on business for the foreseeable future. But they didn't really realize what business they were in. They thought that they were in the railroad business. So when other technologies like air travel, shipping came up, they didn't realize that they were in the transportation business. They didn't pivot to those areas. They stuck and doubled down on their railroads. And that put them out of business in a very short amount of time. And if they had only seen that they were in the transportation business, they would have made a more easy transition to these other modes of transit. So it's so timely that you bring that up now, because if people are worried about social media or they're worried about, trying to think of what else, the book market's losing its share to television, film, streamers. Even we're losing male readers to video games. And there are people with short attention spans that prefer their narrative or sort of their consumption of information in the form of short-term media like, a tweet or an Instagram post. We're losing people to them. So I work with my authors to make sure when they've decided what their values are, what their story is, what their message is, that they're delivering in the form that works in all of those medias. So I guess in a nutshell, I'm trying to protect myself and my clients from becoming obsolete like the railroad businesses by being open to the other mediums as they emerge.
So it's interesting. Really what you're talking about is defining your business. And it's not railroad, it's transportation. It's not books, it's storytelling. That's interesting. Yeah. You alluded to this, but would you go into a little more depth, giving us an overview of the current publishing marketplace? Who is buying books as opposed to stories? Like, for all of our listeners today, what are the opportunities?
Wow. Well, that's a great question. One of the things that's happening in nonfiction, for instance, is that publishers are buying books from celebrities. And those celebrity stories are not being formed in the book world. They're being formed in television and film. So if somebody's a famous movie star or a TV actor or even a television expert, the publisher publishing their book is secondary to the narrative they're creating in another marketplace. So when a celebrity does a book, they're merely monetizing fame that already exists. Yeah. So the publisher buys the celebrity book, they monetize the fame, just like the celebrity or rock star would sell t-shirts at a concert. People are buying those books as a token of their fandom, and that narrative is already decided for the most part. You can get a ghostwriter and massage it a little bit, but mainly they're monetizing a fame that already exists. On the other hand, politicians, for instance, they usually do a book before they make a big run for president. So what they're doing is they're using the publishing industry to shape their narrative and get their official story out there so that people know who they are, and it's a starting point for the ongoing conversation in the campaign. In terms of business, for me, like, I actually rather work with an author that is creating a novel that hopefully will become a hit book and a sensation, and then Hollywood will buy that to adapt it to a film, rather than if a screenwriter called me and said, I already have a TV show that's on the air. Do you want to do the novel spin-off of it? Because then it's secondary to the Hollywood version. So anyway, so publishers are monetizing fame. So in nonfiction, we either need something that is from a celebrity or has a reasonable ability to get its own press and make the author a celebrity in the process of being published. On the fiction side, publishers are mainly looking for hits. The business has gotten to be very algorithmically driven, sort of like the music business. If you look at the music business 10 or 20 years ago, you had far many more bands and musical artists making a living on their record contracts. And through Spotify and all the streaming services that use algorithms to auto-suggest songs to people, we've now gotten to a point where there's maybe 5 or 10 artists like Taylor Swift that make all the money out there. And a lot more people are hobbyists, let's say, as musicians. So unfortunately, with a lot of people buying books from Amazon and using Goodreads, auto-suggest and all that kind of stuff, we're seeing the same kind of bifurcation in the publishing industry. And there's some research on that statistically, mathematically, it's an inevitability that algorithms create fewer winners who make more money and have more people who are basically also rans. So publishers are aware of this, and where a publisher might have done 40 or 50 books in the past, they're trying to do fewer books, but invest in the books that they perceive will be hits. I think that puts the agent and even people like you, educators like you, Jane, in a position of trying to help our authors, our writers that are with us to develop the ability to create hits. Like, I have to become a hit maker because that's what publishers are looking for.
So there's no more mid-list or less and less of a mid-list.
No, the mid-list is being hollowed out by the haves and a larger cohort of have-nots. And
yet I'm sorry to interrupt. You remain optimistic about the industry.
Well, yeah, I'm optimistic about the industry because narrative shapes our lives in a way that people find that it's useful to people in a very deep, profound way. And they will always be looking for stories that make sense of their lives, make sense of the world that we live in. I believe that stories are inspiring to people and help people be their best selves. And I'm going to do it regardless of how lucrative it is or not. And there usually is a cyclical effect where publishers will go through this thing where they say, we only buy hits. And then they realize they strike out on the few bets they made on hits. And then they go back to saying, well, we got to diversify a little bit. We have to hedge ourselves. So there's usually like a cyclical process that goes on. Plus, I'm very confident in my ability to get hits. So
oh, nice.
Yeah.
And you talk about your value-based storytelling. And I'm sure that's part of what authors need to know to give their best work. Can you give us a short overview of it?
Sure. I've been doing this for 20 years. And in the beginning, I must say, I got lucky in a way. Like some good things came my way. And in my naivete, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I sold a few things. I actually was trying to learn from some of the other people around me. There was vague talk of my gut, and you know it when you see it, and you can't really make hits, that kind of stuff, which you don't hear in music. Like everybody knows Rick Rubin's a hit maker, like they don't say that kind of thing. In publishing, it's kind of like, it's a lot of ooh, like being like a practical mind. I realized that I didn't want to just take shots in the dark, and I didn't want to just go on my gut. I really felt like to have a career at this, I wanted to develop a methodology. I wanted to have an approach that I could measure my own success through my clients. It's something that I could convey to clients, to have a vocabulary and a grammar of storytelling that would be helpful to them. So I went on a very long, deep quest into storytelling, reading all of the stuff that's out there, and also very closely examining the hits. I came up with a common element of the books that were successful. It really wasn't quality-based, because there are plenty of bestsellers people say suck, right? They're like, oh, I tried to read that. It's a bestseller, but it's not that well written. And it didn't have to do with, some are fast-paced, some are methodical or plotting or dirge-like. What I found that was consistent was the values. When people recognize their values, especially deeply held values, when they recognize their values in the work, they tend to think that that's for me, and they go for the ride, as long as the execution isn't terrible. And when they do word of mouth, or let's say when they do an Amazon review or a Goodreads review, people aren't really educated enough to give a critique on execution. What they're saying is, this book is for me, or this book is not for me. So what's really deciding it for them, if it's for them or not? It's usually the values that the book is about. And also word of mouth, right? Like what is driving word of mouth? And word of mouth is a huge component to success. You have to have a viral book. Like people have to hand sell it. The booksellers have to give word of mouth. You want somebody like you or me to buy 12 copies and give it to all their friends and relatives and convince their book club to do that. What do they do? What would drive somebody to do that except for the book to be about their values? Like if the book is about home sweet home or family values, and that strikes a chord with the reader in a way that reinforces that value in their personal identity and in their life, then they're going to go around and say, hey, you have to read this book, hoping the other person will see the same values and reciprocate and say, yeah, that's what is important to me too. That's what I care about in life. And when your book is the mode of communicating a value, and for somebody to reciprocate that, you're building community. A community is people who share values. So I really love books and storytelling because of its role in a community building experience for people. And I think that that's what makes books viral, is when it's become a medium for this community building. There's a lot more to it than that, but to me, that's the secret sauce. And even knowing it, sometimes it's hard to pull it off, but that's what I'm pursuing in my methodology.
That's so helpful and so interesting, and quite high level. I mean, that's taking a very wide lens to the process and saying that themes matter.
Oh, yeah, very much. Yeah. And the way my approach is compatible with everything everybody's ever read. It's compatible with your books. It's compatible with the 3-act structure. It's compatible with Joseph Campbell's Hero Mythology. It's compatible with Save the Cat. It's a nice enhancer to all of what's already out there, but it puts a really good why into the book. Like, why this book? Why should the reader care? Why should they tell their friends about it? And some people say that, like, what's the point? I think I'm able to articulate it in a way that, like, can prompt people to add it if it's not there.
Wonderful. Any projects you're working on now or clients you're working with that you're excited about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm having a lot of success in your genre lately. I have Alicia Bassett, who's published at Berkeley. She was just nominated for the Edgar for the Lillian Jackson Cozy Award, which is the first year they have a Cozy Award. So we're really happy with her. That got a rave review in the New York Times, and it's a SIBA bestseller in the Southeast independent bookstores, which are great, including Downtown Books and Manteo, which is fantastic. We also have Annalise Ryan, who's got a book called A Death in Door County, also at Berkeley. That's a cryptozoologist who solves crimes. People think that Loch Ness or the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot are killing people, but usually it's some nefarious human, using cryptids as a cover-up for their dirty deeds. We just sold that to AMC for development as a TV series. Let's see here. I have Jamie Brenner, who's a very popular summer beach read author. She writes books set in Provincetown, where you can find East End books. Jeff Peters there is a great bookseller. Let's see. Oh, I just signed a really good client too. She's a published mystery writer, acclaimed and successful as a novelist, but also is a fantastic nonfiction writer and teacher of writing. Jane Cleland. Maybe your viewers know her.
Thank you, Adam. It's true. About 6 weeks ago, I'm very excited to be working with you.
I'm very excited to work with you, and I hope that we could share some news soon of the results of our effort. But it's going to be great, Jane.
Yeah,
I'm very
we have
happy.
a couple of exciting things in the hopper. Moving on from that, I'd love to ask you to talk a little bit about your own work as an author. You have a wonderful story, if I may say so, about how you got started.
Oh, well, I'm just an awful opportunist. So, well, it's kind of a funny story. I had a client who wrote a memoir about getting his dream job, which I won't say specifically what it was, but it was a memoir about getting his dream job and being disillusioned where the job wasn't quite what he thought it was going to be. This is a few years now going back. Everybody was saying to promote the book, you have to have social media, and you have to do something to promote the book. And at that time, Tumblr was a very big. It was like the Instagram of the day, and a lot of people were doing something called user-generated content sites, like F My Life, where people would say like a statement about how their life was messed up, and then FML, and people were doing stuff like awkward family photos. So I said to the guy, I said, look, you should do a site like that, but instead of F My Life, where people complain about their life, they complain about their job, because you have a memoir about not liking your job. Let people complain and vent about the jobs they can't afford to quit, the jobs that they're stuck in. And that would be a great promotional vehicle for you. And the guy said, oh, no, I don't really have the time. I said, okay, I'll create the Tumblr site, and I won't put any ads on it except for your book for 6 months. So if it's a hit, if it works, the site will still be an ad for your book, but it'll be mine. I own it because I'm putting all the work in, all the time in. So I put the thing up called pleasefireme.com, where people would complain about their job and say, please fire me. And the log line was submit if you can't quit. That went up, and within 6 weeks, that book, that website, pleasefireme.com, had so much press. I was in the Post, I was in the Daily News, I was in Esquire magazine. I got more press than any of my clients' books were getting, let alone that one. And we had a book deal and a TV deal within 6 weeks. So
Isn't that wild?
yeah. So unfortunately for him, the marketing campaign for his book outgrew the book that it was intended to market. And that's good. And along the way, I've done some other stuff. Being in the business and being creative, I stumble on things and they end up working out really well. Like I saw a play in a Christmas pageant in Troy, New York a few years ago. And I love this Christmas pageant so much. It was a new production. It was like almost improvised. It was a courtroom battle between the two families that claimed that their ancestor wrote that 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, which is the poem that basically invented Christmas. So these lawyers up there created a fake trial where the two families sue each other to see whose ancestor really wrote the poem that invented Christmas, with Santa with the round belly and the red clothes and all that, and reindeer on the roof. So I got the rights to that. I approached the guys and I said, I love this. I think it should be a Christmas movie. And I sold that to Hallmark. So I was an executive producer on that, and it was out this past Christmas.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. I try to find some fun stuff to do. I was working on this other thing. I got to be friends with a polka musician, and I went on tour with him because I wanted to see him play like Oktoberfest and polka festivals around the polka belt from Ohio to Pennsylvania. So I went on the road with him a little bit. And I wrote a TV comedy, a half-hour spec script called The Polka Outlaw. We have some people interested in that. So anyway, storytelling's fun. So I do it as much as I can.
That's excellent. Thank you. Let's turn back to your work as a literary agent.
Hold on. Laureen saw The Child Before Christmas. She saw my Christmas movie. That it was good. All right.
Back to you as wearing your literary agent hat. Can you give some do's and don'ts for querying?
Yeah, that's a good one. There's a lot of information out there on word count, don't make any mistakes, like really the nuts and bolts of it. And I got to say that, I should preface this by saying, before I became a literary agent, I actually tried to be a screenwriter for a little bit. And I sent out maybe 50 queries and nobody ever responded to me. So it was easier for me to become a literary agent than it was for me to get a literary agent. So I empathize with the frustration in trying to get somebody to respond to you. And I have to admit that I did all the wrong things as I was getting rejected. I think I was adding more and more of a argument. I was probably engaging in something I call spectacle. Like I was trying to like really oversell it and get into like, I guess spectacle is a good word. Like I was trying to like go with the flash and all that kind of stuff. And what I really was not able to do was make people care. Like I should have either found a way to convey my story that would make the reader of the query care about it, getting back into our values here,
right?
Or recognize that my story did not lend itself to, people caring deeply about. And so if I was honest about the story, it wasn't effective. And then maybe you have to tell a better story so that the honest query conveys something that people will care about.
You just said something interesting. I guess the question that is in my mind is agents always say they want a good book. And the question is, what makes a book good? One of the things I have observed from framing the question is that people tell too much about plot as opposed to premise or theme. And plot is that series of incidents that taken together tell the story. But what an agent probably, I'm speculating here, wants to know is the story, not the plot. Does that sound right?
Yes. And I think we're dancing around the same thing here, because I want to know who is the story and why do I care about the story. The plot is just the nuts and bolts of how you get there. It's the trees. And you're not really giving people a forest that they want to be part of. I know it's kind of hard to translate this to a query, but if you look at one of the biggest successes in the last decade, Hunger Games, mega best-selling book, trilogy, the movies did great. Suzanne Collins probably made $100 million on the books and the movies. Read the first paragraph of Hunger Games. You picture the movie, you have it's dystopian, it's outer space, it's the past, it's Earth. Who knows, how did she start that? The first sentence is, I woke up this morning and I reached for my sister. We sleep together to stay warm. Right away, you're getting a sense of family love, home sweet home, sibling love between the sisters. Wake up this morning is optimism for a new day. We sleep together to stay warm. They're underdogs. You immediately care about this person. There's another sentence where she says, probably in bed with mom. Sometimes she sleeps with mom since dad's gone. And I'm starting to say, hey, where's dad? I care about these two young girls that sleep together to stay warm. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling this disruption of the values by the dad's absence. The third sentence is, it'd be a great day today, which is, again, is optimistic values, if it weren't for the reaping. And it's whoa, what's the reaping? That's the mic drop. That's whoa, that's that's the signal that something really heavy is going to happen. If you started a query with that first paragraph or some version of that, where you have a sentence that conveys an idyllic that's easily relatable, that's widely and deeply filled with widely, deeply held values, you bring me right in. I'm in there. And then you have what I call the butt cut, which is the thing that undermines that value. But it would be a great day today if it weren't for the reaping. And you put me on edge, because I just had my values shown to me. I connected with them, and then it ripped out from under me with this butt cut of the reaping. And then I have to keep going to see what happens after that. That's kind of my version of storytelling. I do there's a lot to get to that, but mainly I try to show values and then I butt cut them to make the audience feel like something was taken away. And then they have to keep turning the pages and going through all the butt cuts where the values continue to get pushed away until there's a satisfaction in the values at the end, which make us feel the beginning values even more than we did before because we lost them. If we believe in family and love and home sweet home, and then they were taken away from us and we go on this journey to earn them back, when we get them back at the end, now they're tempered and stronger like steel. We feel the sense of love and justice and family more than we did before. And that makes us better people. That inspires us to go out there and do the right stuff in life, and have a better life. So anyway, I think that's a really, the first 25 pages of Hunger Games is the best thing I've ever read, and it's worth $100 million.
Wow.
Because when Katniss, you read the first 25 pages, all she does is show you a value and then butt cut it, show you another value, then butt cut it, show you another value and butt cut it. Maybe 50 or 60 values she shows that any reader is going to connect to at least 10 or 15 of them. But she shows them all, and then it takes them all away, each one, value cut. And then when the girl is picked, the younger sister's picked, all of your values are set. So when Katniss stands up and says, I will stand in for my sister, she's standing up for all the values of the reader. And you get goosebumps because she's standing up for you. And then you're hooked. You have to read the rest of it till you get it all back. And it's a masterpiece. I don't think many authors can accomplish that in the way that it's done, because it's 25 pages of exposition that feels like action. I guess it's the highest ideal of what I'm trying to do.
Wow, that's terrific and just so clear. And I think a wonderful place to now open it up to our audience questions, participants. So John, I'm going to turn it over to you and eagerly listen.
Okay. Someone wanted to know, what should we expect an agent to do for us in today's publishing environment? And should that cost us anything? And if so, how much?
Well, I'll start at the end and work my way back. It's against the normal policy and ethics of publishing for agents to accept payment for reading manuscripts or editing. So you shouldn't have to pay anything, but can send your manuscripts or queries to an agent, and hopefully they will take you on because they want 15% of what you're going to do. So hopefully if somebody queries me and they have the next Hunger Games, I'll be working for them, hoping to get the 15% of what that ends up being. And sometimes we can't represent everybody, so we pass on people that are not good business investments for us in terms of time. Sometimes we meet authors that maybe have potential. We send them out to freelance editors. That happens. It's not always successful. You know what I mean? We also say if it's nonfiction, sometimes people hire ghostwriters. Celebrities hire ghostwriters. So, and when you publish, you do have to spend money on your own marketing. So there is a big investment in time and sometimes money, but you really don't pay agents directly for their work. They're doing it for the 15%.
And I'll jump in by adding that different agents have different approaches, strategies. I know one author whose agent actually goes to book signings, sends someone, a staff person, to book signings at, say, a library event to actually physically sell books. That's the only agent I've ever heard of doing anything like that. Some agents are quite strong editorially, others are not. Some agents only work with publishing, and if you have any interest in film or TV, that would go through a secondary agent elsewhere. But never pay an agent money. They make money when you make money.
Yeah.
Excellent. Go ahead.
That's fine. I'm good.
Oh, okay. Someone says the industry seems as if it's going through a very big transformation right now. The writers' strike in Hollywood, artificial intelligence being big, many successfully self-published authors, with the last years being so rapidly changing. Do we think that's an anomaly or a shape of things to come? Or what would you say to someone drawn to the traditional route in today's market? Will it ever be what it used to be?
Well, I have worked with some self-published authors that have transitioned to traditional publishing. Self-published authors that are successful, they're very successful and successful at a level where they don't want to go to traditional publishing. Like if you self-publish, you're making more than 50% of whatever you sell on Amazon. If you go to a traditional publisher, you're making 15 to 20% or whatever. Off the top of my head, I don't remember. I guess ebooks are maxed out at 25%. We make a lot more money per unit on self-publishing. So if you find a way to sell 1 million copies of every book you have, self-publishing, you're probably not going to go to a traditional publisher. And if you don't go to a traditional publisher, you probably don't want a literary agent. Why pay them 15%? You may engage an agent for the performance rights, but then you might go to CAA or William Morris Endeavor or somebody that specializes in screen stuff. So that wouldn't be my game. But I have worked with some publishers that have had some success in self-publishing, but they really need the platform of the publisher to go out to a wider level. So what they've done is maybe master their storytelling approach. They're telling good stories. That's the cream's rising to the top in this very crowded marketplace of ideas and stories. And they want to go to a publisher that's going to give them an advance, but also be like a force multiplier to get the book more widely distributed and known and stuff like that. So I've done that a couple of times, but I think, a lot of people, some people self-publish because they can't convince me and the publisher to get behind them. And then but they do the same thing in self-publishing that they would have done with us. And it didn't win us over, and we're the focus group. And then it doesn't win anybody over in self-publishing. So then they self-publish and they sell 50 copies or 250 copies. And then they query me saying, hey, I couldn't get anybody to publish it, so I published it. But I only sold 250 copies because I don't have a publisher behind me. So now be my agent to get me a publisher. And like, you've proven that there's no market for what you're doing. And I can't really help those people unless they want to do like a complete reboot. Yeah, I don't really deal with too much self-publishing because it's a little bit of a personality type that wants to do everything their way. They don't want to edit the book for me. They don't want to let a publisher pick the cover. They don't want to trust the marketing campaign to somebody else. And if they're right on enough of it, they're successful enough that they don't need me. And, you know, I wish them I congratulate them on their success, but they don't usually interface that much with me.
And just to expand on one thing you said, you mentioned in advance, in traditional publishing, you get money up front, typically half when you sign the contract and half when you deliver an acceptable manuscript. And then your royalties are taken against the advance. And once you earn out that advance, then you start getting extra royalties. So that's how that process works. From what I have heard from industry experts, it is fewer than 1/10 of 1% of self-published books sell more than 100 copies. It's very hard.
It's very, very hard.
Now, I guess I should also, a little asterisk comment, there are other reasons that a person might want to self-publish. Estonian recipes from my mother. Maybe there's a Facebook group, for example, of Estonian people who would be eager to buy that book, and you want to do it because you want to honor your mother. You don't want her recipes lost. You'd love for it to become a bestseller, but probably that's not in the cards. I got the rights back of a couple of my early business communication books that were out of print and brought them out as ebooks because I was going for tenure and I wanted to beef up my publication record. That's another reason why someone might do that sort of thing. But I will tell you, these are very good books. McGraw-Hill published one, Penguin published the other, and they had a nice little run for a while. I'm going back a lot of years. But if I earn $100 a year on both of them together, that's a lot.
Yes.
So it's, I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's a very specific example, and I concur with that. I actually, some of my clients' books were published before the contracts had ebooks in it. So yes. we published their ebooks parallel to the print publications that already exist, and they're making quite a few dollars every year on this backlisting of the books. And I'll tell you a couple of other self-published success stories. The Zagat Guide. Remember when we had restaurant review books? Like the maroon book with all the restaurant reviews?
I loved it. But whenever
that was self-published. They were their own company. They're like, we don't need a publisher. We'll take 90% of all the revenue that comes in. Chicken Soup for the Soul was originally self-published. Those guys would do seminars in hotels. They'd go on the road and do these inspiring seminars. And the first Chicken Soup for the Soul started out as a mimeograph collection of some of the anecdotes and stories that people would hear, and people would say, "Oh, I want that on paper," and they photocopied it and handed it out. And then with the demand for that, they realized they could put a nicer cover on it, and it became a pamphlet and then a book, and they self-published it successfully and built a whole publishing company around it called HCI, Health Communications Inc. And they have a movie studio now too called Halcyon. So they built a whole empire on self-publishing those collections of stories, but that's the exception rather than the rule.
That's right. Yeah. Those are good examples.
Yeah. Can I get into one of the questions on the sidebar?
Sure.
Somebody was saying that they were afraid to show their work in publishing and in Hollywood because they're afraid that their ideas will be stolen. And I hope I could help that person out here. In Hollywood and in publishing, they don't buy ideas. They buy the execution of the ideas. The ideas are usually archetypal. The values are universal. A lot of the books have the same values in them. What they're buying is the execution. So if a publisher buys your books, Jane, when they bought Josie Prescott, your Antique Hunters mystery series, they didn't buy it because you had a mystery about an antique hunter. They bought it because you had executed it very well in the first book. And they felt confident that you'd be able to deliver 14 more of those on a regular basis. That's what publishers were buying. Okay. And if Hollywood was looking for a series to make into a book series to make into a television series, they don't want just the idea. Like, even if they stole the idea, an antique hunter who solves crimes, they have every right to write that. As long as they're not calling her Josie and they're not like setting her in the same place and doing the same crimes and the same methodology for solving the crimes, they have every right to do that. There aren't that many original stories. So I think if you want to be in the story business, you can start with a good idea, but the test that you have to pass is actually executing on that idea. And the second test is, can you consistently execute on your ideas? And that's what I'm looking for, and that's what Hollywood and publishers are looking for. And I don't think you could pass those tests if you're hiding your great idea under a bucket, like under the bushel. You have to put yourself out there to show that you can do it.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. John?
Okay, and I actually think that segues into the next question I was going to ask. I was going to ask, someone says, do you have one concise tip on how a writer can, in fact, succeed in the agent hunt?
Yeah, make me care. Like that. That's it. Like if the query starts out like the first line of Hunger Games, or even the first 2 minutes of Taken, the movie with Liam Neeson, that's imagine a little girl's birthday party, happy birthday, blah, blah, blah. Now, cut to the father's alienated from the family and the girl gets kidnapped, and he has to come back and get his daughter back to redeem his to restore his relationship with her and redeem his family and his place, in the family and the community. I would be all over that, for sure. If you're hitting me with like a bunch of spectacle and nonsense, especially if you're like telling me things like, women's books are popular, TDD. The women's books have never been popular. Like, don't tell me that. I know how popular women's books are. Just tell me a story I'll care about. Like, don't like talk at me. And don't compare yourself. So this is not what to do. These are some what not to do's. Like, don't compare yourself to the number one juggernaut book of the last decade of the genre you're in. So if you're doing erotica, and do you only compare yourself to 50 Shades of Grey? Like, that's not a good sign, because that's like the one juggernaut that, like, first of all, there will never be another one like that. Even if you're doing teen dystopian, if you only compare yourself to Hunger Games, that's a problem. I'm trying to think of what else has been really popular lately. Yeah, if you only compare yourself to like Patterson, it's like, you can't, the odds that you're the next Patterson are like pretty slim. So get some real attainable comparables to give me some context of where you fit in a marketplace and show me that you know who your competition is and who your market is.
I've heard that query letters often should follow the hook, book, cook format. Hook the interest in a sentence or two.
Yeah.
Then tell enough about the story to sustain that interest, and then why you and where you fit in that marketplace. And that's where the comps would go.
That's good. Yeah. I wish I had thought of that. That's exactly what I'm saying. The hook is make me care. The book is the execution that will follow, that will deliver on that. And then the cook is who you are and why you have a chance of being successful as an author. That's perfect. Hold on, let me write that down.
Hook, book, cook. It's not mine. It's been around.
Oh shit!
It's sort of attributed to Anonymous.
I was going to get it tattooed. I thought it was yours, Jane.
Okay. See, someone says, when you say people are looking for values they identify with and care about, why then are books and movies like, say, The Godfather, or even a lot of crime fiction and drama based on books about criminal activities then so popular?
Well, The Sopranos is a family story. It's family values. So, like, you're thinking, it's not or did you say The Godfather?
Yeah, he said The Godfather.
Okay, The Godfather.
Absolutely a family story.
Yeah, it's a family story. And actually, it's not my favorite story. I actually, out of personal preference, do not like mafia stories because of the overlap here. But yeah, it's a family story. And there are also ways of inspiring Schadenfreude in readers. There's a way of taking something that is familiar to people like family and doing the twisted version of it. Freud wrote an essay called The Uncanny, where he talks about you take the familiar, the thing that is known to the people, the idyllic of like what's canny, and then you undo it and you make it into something that's uncanny and twisted, and then that's what creates horror. So in a way, it's a horror story because it's taking family and showing this twisted version of it. So it's still trafficking in the values that I care about, which is family and home sweet home, but it's showing this sort of horror version of it that is meant to make us glad that our family is not that bad. Like our families are imperfect and have issues and power struggles and quarrels and rivalries and feuds, but we get to say, oh, at least we're not killing each other like the characters in The Godfather. So there is a psychology of that explains that.
Yeah. And I mean, when I think about crime novels and crime movies, they're all about the people. Hopefully, they're about chaos and then restoring order.
Restoring, that's the key word. Freud says that in The Uncanny. You start with the canny, you uncanny it, and then you restore the value at the end that we started with. And every Law and Order episode and every crime novel, it starts with this implication of the status quo where things are okay. And then the body is the first butt cut. It's the first undoing of our sense of justice and peace. And then the hero and the audience with the hero try to solve the crime to restore the value of justice and peace and every life is precious and all of that at the end. And when it's solved at the end, it gives us comfort that that the world, that we can survive this world and that there are people and institutions that will restore these values for us, or even that we are inspired to do what we can to restore those values in our world or, in a wider world. So yeah, that's a great example of it. And I think there's the bestseller code, which came out a few years ago about best-selling books versus not best-selling books and the common elements that these computers that analyze them were able to discern. They have an explanation of why crime fiction and thrillers are so popular.
There is a question in the queue of whether or not Adam's accepting queries, and if so, where you prefer to be contacted through.
Oh, thank you. That's great. I was going to throw that out there. My website is movabletm.com. That's MOVABLE, T as in Tom, M as in Mary.com. And on there, we have an email you can send a query to, and also my bio. And I have an agent in training now, Ginger Hutchinson, who's very good and has been working with me on this approach, and very bright young agent. And she's going to have a really bright future in this business. So you can decide if you want to query and email her or me. But our information's on the website, and we are looking for stuff. I must say my career is at a point where I'm looking for more advanced writers, people who already can write, but maybe can benefit from my approach to go to the next level. And Ginger's more looking for the first-time authors who need a little bit more editorial input and guidance, because her list is not as extensive as mine. She has the time, and she's also better educated at it than I am. She went to Wesleyan and studied creative writing. So she's a good complement, sort of big picture approach.
And just to go ahead and segue off of that with one more question there, do you or Ginger currently accept children's novels?
I don't want to say I don't represent young adult, because I'm selling two right now, but mainly I do it when I have an adult author who is a valuable client to me, and they have a YA book, and I'll sell it because I want to offer 360-degree representation. I don't want to split their representation with another agent. but we're not actively looking for it. It's a different set of editors. It's a different game, and it's hard to do just adult fiction and nonfiction well to spread. And I also do Hollywood stuff and some other stuff, so it's very hard to spread myself that thin. But if you have the next Hunger Games, I want it.
Okay. Someone asks, what if you catch the attention of an agent from a query, but you have another book you'd also like published? Is this something worth bringing up at the time, or should it be considered part of your commitment before signing on a book contract?
I would only mention one book in the query. When I get a query that says I have multiple books, it's a turn off, because it seems like the person querying me did not realize that you only have one shot and you have to give it your best shot. So even if you have two great books, you have to pick the better one and go with that. But when the agent has responded to the query and maybe even has read the submission and offers to represent you, I think it's very natural to have a conversation about how you got to write that book, what you're writing next. They want to get a sense of where your career narrative is at the time, and they'll want to know at that time. And representing you includes understanding that the most valuable thing to a publisher is a debut novel or the first book. And when we sell a book, there's an option for the next book. There's an option chain, and they won't they won't acquire a book if you tell them a small press is going to publish this other thing I wrote 6 months from now, because that could bomb and create a very low threshold of success, like a low ceiling on you. And then nothing they could do with the book that comes out a year and a half later can make up for what that other publisher and you did with that other book. If I sign somebody, like, you're not publishing anything until what we work on together is published, hopefully with the highest ceiling of success that you can have from a debut book, novel, or nonfiction. So yes, the agent will sign you for everything, and will tell you to put the other things aside to go with the best thing you have that will create, hopefully, a market for the other things you have as follow-up.
To reiterate that one point, that you don't sign with an agent for a book. You sign with an agent for your career. And
yeah, I don't represent books. I represent authors.
Okay, and just a few other people asked in chat as you were answering that. How does that apply to series? If you're pitching a book, you're supposed to focus on that first book, but should you make it known that you intend for this to be 2, 3, 4 books?
Yes.
Okay. Someone says, do you find that there's ageism in the traditional publishing industry with new authors? Do they prefer younger writers who may possibly have a very long career versus an older person who, unfortunately, statistically may not? I'm in my 60s and wonder if that will be a deterrent to publishers when pitching my novels.
What? HR just told me not to answer that. Sorry.
Well, I'll throw in one comment. That's funny. Alan Bradley published his first book, The Sweetheart Pie. What was it called? That is the name. The Secret of, what is the name? I've just gone blank on that wonderful book. Anyway, he was 72 years old, and first novel. And I think he's up to book 8 or 10 by now.
Yeah, well, I was kidding about HR, but of course there's ageism in every business. It's a little bit of a reality. I try not to let it affect me, but I think that publishing is one of the places where it has the least negative effect. It's very hard to imagine a 20 or 30 writer in their 20s or 30s having the wisdom or even the craft to be an excellent writer. A lot of writers, it takes years for them to develop their craft and find things worth writing about. It's very, like, in a lot of industries, if you're in your 50s, you're approaching retirement. But a lot of authors just get started in their 50s. So there's a long, long time before ageism will get to you. And I think ageism can sometimes be confused with a bias against people who don't have what it takes. Like, if you're an older person that does not do social media, that does not use, like I get queries in the mail that look like they were typed on an old typewriter. And the book might be great, but is this person going to be able to do a podcast, like a book podcast tour when the book comes out? Like, I'm not rejecting them because they're 75, but I might be rejecting them because I don't think that they're computer literate. Yes, you have to show a proficiency with the technology and the modes of communication that are available today. You know, sometimes there's a book out there where somebody might write a book and I would market it as, yeah, this 80-year-old in a cabin wrote it, not Ted Kaczynski, but like, this person wrote it and they're not going to promote it. It's just like, we discovered this, unknown genius, and here it is. He's not going to do any, or she is not going to do any promotion. They just put the books out there, and it's the mystery. It's the marketing angle is the mystery of who wrote this book. Like, we could even do that, but I think people are being rejected more for their lack of promise in promotion and delivering than for their age. But they may take it as their age if they're looking for a reason.
Excellent. Someone asks, if an author has worked on their manuscript with an independent editor, how does that affect, if at all, your likelihood to want to represent their project?
That doesn't bother me at all. I think that's part of the process of learning and growing and getting to the point where you have to do the book. For me, very personally, there's some agents who like that. Like, they have authors that use the same freelance editor over and over again. To me, that's too many cooks. Like I like authors that could write their own stuff and they don't need a freelance editor to like get to the finish line, because then they hand me the manuscript and it doesn't, let's say, conform to my value-based story approach. And I say, well, you deviated from the last book because you did this and this. And they say, well, Stacy told me, it was great. I was like, well, Stacy's not your agent. Like we are establishing a style for your books. And like, I kind of hope that people could just use my feedback and in Hollywood, they call it the franchise. Like, the franchise is what your story, like a TV show, like every episode has like a format that they do. They call that the franchise of the show, and go through that format for each episode. So an author's franchise is what kind of book they do, like what is the reader expectation. So once I get that established in the first book, I'm kind of hoping the author could do it on their own with me and their acquiring editor as the only input. If they have to outsource their writing, or revising to somebody else, like I wonder about it being too many cooks, and maybe even these editors are expensive. It might not be financially viable. It doesn't turn me off on the first one, but I start wondering after that.
Okay. Going back to your previous question where you talked about the ability to market and be relevant technologically, does the number of Facebook and Twitter followers a author has when they query really influence an agent's outlook, or is it more their ability to show that they can do these things?
Yeah, I think they have to show that they can. It'll take 2 years for the book to come out, on a lot of novels. That's a typical time frame. So, but they have to get on it, But there's a lot of things people could do. Let's say Instagram, for instance. One of the most important things that I need debut authors to have is blurbs. They need to have blurbs from other authors in their genre, not their one cousin's in-law who published a book. Like, it has to be in your genre. So if you're doing cozy mysteries, you want a blurb from Jane, right? So I need a few blurbs, and let's say we're looking at the pub date event at the local bookstore to like kick off the book and maybe get some pictures and, like at least have an auspicious start to the publication. Who besides your family and friends is going to show up there? And they're already buying books, unless you're in conversation with somebody. So if you're a cozy mystery writer that's in the Northeast, you'd want Jane to be in conversation with you at the book release. If you're a beach read author, you want Jamie Brenner or Elvin Hildebrand doing In Conversation with you so people will show up. So if you wait till your book is coming out to get on Instagram and start reaching out to Jane and Jamie Brenner and all these people, and your first contact with them is an ask, do me a favor, give me a blurb, show up at my event, you're not going to hear back from them. They're just, there are a lot of people bothering them. But if 2 years before your book comes out, you're on Instagram and you follow Jane, you follow Jamie Brenner, you go to their book events every year, you buy 10 books. And Ellen Hildebrand says, you're buying 10 books. Yeah, I love your books. I give them out to all my friends. They're like, oh, that's so great. I love you. Like, yeah, I'm a writer too. And then Ellen's like, oh, that's so great. Here's my email. When you're publishing, let me know. Like Adriana Trigiani blurbs so many books, but she's friends with all of those people because they go to her events. They buy her books. They comment and like her posts on Instagram. You could build rapport with what other art or form of entertainment can you meet the stars for the cost of a $25 book at Barnes & Noble, an independent bookstore? There is no excuse for a publisher who wants to be published to not have 2 or 3 authors willing to blurb them, or at least one person willing to be in conversation with them when their book comes out. You do that 2 years before your book comes out.
Okay. Someone wanted to know if you had any information about the typical numbers a cozy mystery that is traditionally published sells, or if those sorts of numbers are even publicly available.
I don't think too many people want to talk about those numbers because it would be a little bit depressing if people saw that. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's a hit business. Like, publishers want to find the book that's going to be the Thursday Night Murder Club, The Maid, Killers of a Certain Age. They're looking for the breakouts. And say 1 out of 20 books is a breakout like that. They're willing to absorb the 19 books that sell 5,000 copies, 10,000 copies, because they know that if you're a good writer and you keep trying, you might eventually get that. You might have the breakout. Your 4th book might be the breakout. Or we did 6 books of this series. It didn't break out, so we're just going to shut it down and start a new series because it's very unlikely that the 7th book will do it. If you haven't made it by 6 books, it's over. Start a new series. So we don't really worry about that so much. Like, we worry about the books are good, they're reviewed, there's some traction, and we're looking for that, like, sort of lighting. We're looking for the confluence of factors that make something a hit and evaluating whether that person has a good shot at doing it again and again. If you keep publishing and your numbers keep going down, that's not a good sign, but we're kind of trying to make hits. And if we don't, we repeat business with authors that we feel like have a shot at a hit. They just haven't had a hit yet.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question, John.
Okay. Someone wanted to know if there was a place online that offers samples or a reference you could mention that offers advice on how to write a good query letter.
Jim, do you have that?
Yeah, I do. Query Shark, that's Janet Reed, R-E-I-D. She is a literary agent, and she's very frank and direct. And one of the things she says in her advice that I think is very sensible is if you send out 10 query letters to properly selected agents, in other words, agents who represent your genre and are open to receiving queries, and you don't get any nibbles, there's probably something wrong with the query letter. If you get nibbles and you don't get any takers, there's probably something wrong with the book. And go 10 by 10, fixing whatever seems to be wrong, and persevere.
That's great advice. Yeah.
And so on that note, thank you so much, Adam, for taking the time to be with us. This was wonderful. And thank you, John, for your usual wonderful job. Thank you all for being with me and spending this time with me. I'm so appreciative. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, next time. And until then, I hope you find great strength and solace from reading and writing. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, John. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.